Now, the argument could stop there. Yes, there is a Jewish people. No, there isn't. Judaism is only a religion and not a religion, etc., etc. My advice would be, well, let's go with the argument. Let's, for the sake of the argument, and I underline, for the sake of the argument, say, well, okay, there is a Jewish people. Well, if there is a Jewish people, do you recognize that they have the right for national self-determination? Well, if I recognize them as Jews, they have the right for they have the right for national self-determination, they have the right for their own state. Yes, if they have the right for their own state. But then the critical question, as far as I'm concerned, is what you claim you have the right to do in the name of that state, in the name of the Jewish people, in the name of national self-determination. If you claim that in the name of the Jewish people, to unlimited asylum, invite the Palestine refugees back, return their property rights and rehabilitate them, their property rights inside the state of Israel, we have no argument. In other words, I wouldn't argue on the level of a Zionist abstract argument. I would always ask, what do you think you have the right to do in the name of that abstraction? So that's one way I found efficient dealing with that particular argument. Another argument, common argument, I don't know if today with Israeli illegal stockpiling of nuclear bombs, is that there is that the Israeli politics are motivated by genuine existential fear. Well, correct. If you ethnically cleanse a country and you have not been a successful criminal like the North American settler colonial criminals who ethnically cleansed and genocide, removed an entire population out of North America, yes, you have a problem. You are not being as successful as North American criminals, and you have the ethnically cleansed people reduced to misery of refugee existence on the other side of the fence. Well, if you do that, you have good reason to fear, yes? The people oppressed in this way would resist. But the answer to that is not more and more violence, more and more criminality, more and more oppression, occupation, and death. The answer to that is different. For instance, invite the people back. For instance, institute the mechanism where the property rights are rehabilitated. It is fairly reasonable to believe that if you do that, a person who is today your enemy would not be your enemy in the future, and the future may not be that distant. It only took 4 years for Nelson Mandela to defeat de Klerk in the first democratic elections in South Africa. Just 4 years. The mainstream of the white constituencies in South Africa were solidly pro-apartheid. People who were anti-apartheid and of white extraction were a minority within the white constituency, maybe 1%, 2%, 3%, and within 4 years the balance of the vote reversed. So it doesn't have to take that long. But I also want to recognize a difficulty, and perhaps I'll assist my intention with my own family situation, my nuclear family situation. My father arrived in Jerusalem in the mid-30s of the 20th century, 1930-35, from London, and my mother arrived at the same time from Czechoslovakia, from Bratislava. They met in Jerusalem and they married in 1939. In 1939, the Second World War erupted and Czechoslovakia came under Nazi occupation, and the family of my mother's sister, her children, her husband, were transported by the Nazi occupation to Auschwitz and assassinated in Auschwitz. Our parents educated us not to generalize. They wouldn't hear any sentence that begins with all. There are good Jews and bad Jews, good Arabs, bad Arabs. It's not the German that killed my family. It's Nazis who killed my family, and not just the Nazis, a particular individual or a party of Nazis that killed my family. My mother did not seek vengeance. My mother sought justice. And anybody who would come to my parents, or to specifically my mother, and offer my mother an opportunity to perpetrate against the person who assassinated her family in Czechoslovakia and in Auschwitz anything like the obscenities that were perpetrated against her sister and her children, she would be horrified. She would spit in that person's face. She did not seek vengeance. She sought justice. The difficult issue for anti-Zionist people, citizens of the State of Israel of Jewish origin, is to convince the mainstream, the pro-apartheid mainstream of the Hebrew society in Israel, that the mainstream of the Palestinian community is more or less like my mother. They are seeking justice, not vengeance. There are parties seeking vengeance, but they're at the periphery, they're at the margin. The mainstream seeks justice, and I can speak responsibly because I've spent the major part of my life at the Arab-Hebrew Interfaith in Defense of Human Rights, and I can speak now as an individual classified as in the leadership constituencies of Fatah. The mainstream seeks justice, not vengeance.
Yeah.
My question is, how come history is able to get away with UN resolutions, most of the UN resolutions, including not cooperating with the UN intervention on Israel attack on the aid ship to Gaza?
There are many factors contributing to that, and Tony is much better than I am in identifying these factors. But at bottom, your question in a way supports my argument. The UN is a political arena. The membership in the UN is government membership. It's quintessentially a political forum. And I don't think they could get away with it through, if challenged in legal fora. We have the beginning of wonderful illustrations of that here in the United Kingdom. Israeli generals are fearful of landing at Heathrow Airport because they know that they could be arrested.
This is my worry is that these are precedents to other countries like my own country, Sri Lanka, where they committed genocide on Tamils, and still they are able to get away with UN intervention. So they said they are not going to cooperate with UN intervention. So, especially when they wanted to intervene the war crime on the Tamils. They said no, they have their own system and they don't want to do it. So in that way, in a sense, people, the countries, most of the rogue nations, they get away with any of the UN resolution and they do whatever they like. They want to do it. And, so this is going to give a bad precedence to any of the non-boisterous people.
Correct.
I think this is an activist in the Tamil community, Selma. I think it's important that times have changed in relation to Israel, and one of the reasons I think they look so stupid is because they miscalculate what time it is. They thought it was like a few months ago. The times have changed so rapidly that poor Israeli Zionist pigs can't keep up with us. And
I tend to agree with Tony that the attack on the flotilla represents a tectonic change, and that we might actually see the downfall of Zionism sooner than we had expected. We spent a lifetime challenging Zionism. It may come rather quickly.
Yes, well, the 4 years, I mean, it took a lot to get to the 4 years that finally overthrew apartheid. He was in 27 before the 4 years began, and it was a really long struggle. And then at a certain point, I mean, many of us have been through that movement, at a certain point, everybody knew that was different. And then at a certain point, even, those who weren't for it before, weren't against it before, all of a sudden found it distasteful and unpopular. And, you were laughed at or sneered at if you were not against apartheid. And that's how it happens. And that is what is happening, it seems to me, right now with Israel. They're becoming unpopular and known. All of a sudden, even The Guardian publishes an editorial that is hostile to Zionism. Not the BBC. But not the BBC.
That's the one bastion.
That is the last bastion of Zionism.
I was in Trafalgar Square with the crowds standing at the doorstep of South